Welcome to a meeting of the Hunterdon Central Regional High School Board of Education. Please be advised that this and all meetings of the board are open to the public and media consistent with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-6, and that advance notice required therein has been provided. Meeting notice was also posted in the boardroom of the Upper School campus, sent to the Courier News, Star Ledger, Express Times, and the Hunterdon County Democrat, and sent to the clerks of Delaware Township, East Amwell Township, Flemington Borough, Raritan Township, and Reddington Township. The public will have an opportunity to be heard as shown on the agenda. Can I have a roll call? Mrs. Spitzer, please.
Mrs. Bloodfield?
Here.
Mr. Davidson?
Here.
Mrs. Duggan?
Here.
Mr. Fowler?
Here.
Mrs. Hughes?
Here.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Here.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Here.
Mrs. Peterson?
Here.
And Mr. Reimer?
Here.
Can everyone rise for the flag salute, please? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
see. Mr. Fowler, would you like to read our district mission statement tonight? Thank you.
Hunterdon Central is an innovative educational community dedicated to the intellectual, social, and emotional safety and growth of all students. While fostering curiosity and promoting wellness, we aspire to create powerful learning experiences, establish strong partnerships, and serve as contributing members of society.
Thank you, sir. Can I have a motion, please, to approve the regular and executive session minutes of the September 18th, 2023 meeting?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Bloodfield?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Duggan?
Yes.
Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson?
I will abstain on the executive session as I did not participate, as I excused myself in regard for the ethics of not participating in certain matters in executive session, and yes on the other.
And Mr. Reimer?
Yes.
All yes, motion carries.
Thank you, Mrs. Spitzer. We have one item for correspondence on the agenda, and with that, we'll move right into Dr. Moore's superintendent report.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Sign of the times, unfortunately, I do have to make an announcement before I even get started with anything that we plan to talk about tonight to let everybody know that we are aware of an online threat that names a central high school as the target, but do understand that this is originating from a central high school in Tennessee. And law enforcement there has been active to arrest students who were posting about their own high school. There are lots of central high schools across the nation, so this has nothing to do with Hunterdon Central. So we'll continue to work with law enforcement on that this evening, get everything tightened up, and just make sure that we're in a position to communicate with everybody about that soon. So just know that that's just something I wanted to say up front because you may be receiving some words. It's about a school in Tennessee. I also have a little bit of just sort of unhappy stuff, but, well, I shouldn't say it that way. We have two people who we have to remember and celebrate tonight, and both have passed in the past week, and they're important members of our central community. So I wanted to offer a couple of thoughts about both of them, and then ask you if you would join me in a moment of silence before we move into our regular business tonight. The first person I'd like to mention is Jacob Wassel, who was a class of 2022 graduate, Hunterdon Central, who passed away last week. Now, Jacob was the co-founder of our esports club, very active in a lot of diverse interests, known by many staff for his love of lots of things, and everyone knew him as an incredibly bright person. We all join, I think, tonight in mourning his loss. The other person I'd like to mention is Mr. Albert Blagbro, who was Mr. B to everybody who knew him here. I see some of our students sort of smiling with memories of Mr. B. Mr. B was one of our favorite substitutes here, well known to staff and students. He was also a frequent attendee at our athletics events because he just wanted to see our students work hard and perform well. And so we hadn't seen him this year, as a substitute. We were very, very saddened last week to learn of his passing. So please join me in a moment of silence for those two Red Devils. Thank you, thank you. So I typically discuss sort of a mission moment after hearing one of the members read the mission. I'm going to hold off on that until after our presentations. We do have two presentations to do tonight. One from Mr. Ed Brandt. It's actually Mr. Brandt has two presentations to do, and we have one from Mrs. Jessica Cangelosi-Hade on our New Jersey student learning assessments. Mr. Brandt, are you ready to go first? All right, so each year we have to report on our annual HIB self-assessment. That's a rubric that we go through to assess our compliance with the harassment, intimidating, and bullying statutes and codes. So Mr. Brandt will present on that, and that is the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights school self-assessment for the folks at the table here. He also has we do it twice each year, we report on the student safety data systems numbers from the second half of last year. Which one are you going to do first for us, Mr. Brandt?
The HIB one.
Okay, the HIB. Can we get the screen down for the audience? Thanks. All right, so it's the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights school self-assessment.
Not yet.
It was muted.
There we go. All right, thank you very much. Just to give you a brief overview, each year our anti-bullying coordinator, along with a team actually called the School Climate Team, meets each year to review the state's rubric to self-assess our anti-bullying Bill of Rights and HIB process. So just again, a brief overview. The School Climate Team takes a look at the data from the year, the previous year. It reviews the policies that we have both internally but also district-wide. And it reviews all of our protocols, and it has a 40-page rubric the state provides that team follows for the scoring. The scoring, there are 8 overall elements, and within those elements there are 26 components. And each of those components are scored from a 0 through 3 rubric, with 3 meaning they exceed the requirements, down to does not meet requirements. As a district, we need to reach 52 total points, and 78 is the absolute maximum that we could earn. Bless you. So the 8 different elements, the core elements, are listed here. They range from overall program approaches and initiatives. I'm going to walk through each of these and some of the scoring. But these are the 8 different overarching core elements. And element number 1, it breaks down to 5 different components. Each of those components range from, you can see there, programs, approaches, initiatives that are, whether they're established, whether they're implemented, are they assessed, are they established to prevent and address HIB, and that School Climate Team, which is different than the climate and culture group that we've been talking about. And I'll talk a little bit about who this team is in a little bit. And, do they examine the data for identified patterns? So that School Climate Team came up with the self-assessment of meeting and exceeding each of those for a total of 15 points in that area. Core element number 2, this is focused on training. And there are 3 different components. In each of those areas, we also exceeded what the minimum base was for the state. Element number 3 identifies, there's actually 5 different, only 4 bullets listed right here, but 5 different areas. Each of those were 3 points. This was the one area that we felt, and the school climate team self-assessed that we lacked that high level of a 3 in each area. And the two key components were this. Number 1, it dealt with our team should have a parent, and it does have a parent, but the parent was also a staff member. So moving forward, we want to look for a parent who is not a staff member to be a part of that team. And the key element with that is the fact that that person also has to go through the full HIB training as well to be able to be on that team. So to find a parent who will go through the training and is our next step in order to make the highest score that we can in that area. So that was, again, the one area that we felt, or the team felt, that we didn't meet the highest score possible. Core element number 4, curriculum and instruction on HIB. This is an area that I want to point out that we're proud to have multiple different levels of instruction for our students. In our 9th grade health curriculum, the HIB process and rules and regulations are explicitly delivered and taught by members of the anti-bullying team. In 10th grade, within the teen mental health units that we have, it's also then brought up again, not explicitly, but within. And in grades 10, 11, and 12, in our opening weeks when we have our full grade meetings, we make sure that a refresher, if you would, for all the students for what they learned in 9th grade is part of the process there. And that's also a great benefit of the fact that we are 9th through 12 in a district or in the state. The majority of our students have had years of this training coming up through 9th grade too. So it's not like in 9th grade this is a new thing for them. Element number 5, the HIB personnel. That team consists of our anti-bullying coordinator, who is Mr. Andrew Estrada. He's our vice principal right now of the 9th grade. He follows that grade, but he is our anti-bullying coordinator. We have specialists, and our specialists last year, most of which are continuing this year, are Katie Egger, Stacy Heller, Allie Buckaloo, Deb Polson, Kevin Carberly, and Ann Taylor. They are all counselors or student assistance counselors within our school as well. That team, the minimum number of times that they have to meet is 2 times a year, but they meet quite often, actually, especially if we have intricate cases and investigations to make sure that they're all on the same page. So they meet to review the processes, but at the same time, they meet as needed throughout. And then that school climate team that I mentioned, which consists of, and it needs to have the anti-bullying specialist, it needs to have a staff member, and it needs to have a parent. They meet at least twice a year as well. And part of one of those meetings is this self-assessment. Core element number 6, this is making sure that our reporting processes are appropriate and we follow that our district regulations and policy matches what the regulations are and expectations from the state. The investigation procedures themselves, everything from notifying parents all the way through to the final report, going through the anti-bullying coordinator's desk, to my desk, to the superintendent's desk, before it goes to you as the board for final review and approval. And then also, again, there, the HIB reporting. The Student Safety Data Systems, or SSDS, which is actually my second presentation tonight, is an element in here. So all HIB reports go through there as well and are reported through that system. And then also the final element there, our school website has posted on there the previous self-assessment reports. We have that from last year's report is on there along with all other HIB requirements easily found in our quick links on our website. So as a quick recap, We needed a minimum of 52 points in order to meet the requirements provided by the state. Out of the 78 possible points, the team felt that the school met up to 76 points there. We had 32 completed investigations last year and 19 confirmed HIB incidents. So that's the overall report there. There is like a scorecard, if you would, that gets submitted to the state and to you as well. So that may have been that second attachment that you had. And that's that for that report. I'm going to shift gears to my other report. And I mentioned in that, pardon me, I mentioned in that one slide that all HIB findings and investigations need to be reported in the student safety data systems. As you may recall, this is a report the principal here provides twice a year. So the first 6 months, if you would, of last school year, that would be from July 1st through December 31st, any incidences that fell under the umbrella of the SSDS, I reported already. And now tonight I'm reporting on the second 6 months. So that would be from anything that occurred from January 1st through June 30th of last year. What gets reported? This used to be, in years past, called the Violence and Vandalism Report. But basically, any incidences of violence, vandalism, weapons offenses, or substance offenses get reported. Also, any of the HIB investigations are reported as well, including any trainings and programs. More specifically, areas that get reported, and this is basically a comprehensive list, that anything that occurs in that 6-month window is being reported tonight. Not only do we handle these within our own information system here, but a document then has to be submitted to the Department of Ed through this homeroom page. And this is, again, a twice-a-year event. So these are all the different elements or actions, if you would, that need to be reported. What I need to report out to you tonight is, number one, the HIB elements that took place the second half of last year. Again, that's January 1st through June 30th of last school year. We had 17 investigations or reports that came to our desk. Of those 17, we used the principal's preliminary discretion for 6 of them. I want to point out, again, that does not mean that an investigation didn't take place. It just meant that it didn't meet the benchmark for HIB. But we would follow through as a code of conduct violation, potentially. An investigation was still conducted. Of the others, there were 8 confirmed HIBs. You, on your previous draft, I have an error on there. My apologies. In counting them up, there was one incident that had 2 different offenders, and I accidentally counted to 9. So the document that you have now is 9, but there was really 8 incidents. And of those 8 incidents, this is the breakdown of the different identifiable characteristics of the targets. So you can see a breakdown there. It actually adds up to 9 because one of the incidences, it was multiple identifiable characteristics. And then as far as the violence, vandalism, substance offenses, and weapons data. So this is the information, again, from the second half of last year. One thing I want to point out, there was a high number of substance offenses, and within that umbrella, possession of any type of substance or paraphernalia. And this I can attribute to the direct output of our vape sensors. So when we have a vape sensor go off, we do go through a search of the belongings. And through that, there was an increase in the number of possession accounts for the second half of last year. Also, that produced those 5 weapons offenses right there. And those 5 weapons offenses were pocket knives that were found in the belongings of the students while we're doing a search because of the vape sensor going off. So I wanted to point that out. That is an uptick from previous years. And then you can see the others, if you would. The one area I would point out for clarification and just note, the cell phone violation, we do not suspend any students for a typical cell phone violation because it was out in class. This was mainly due to the fact that maybe a cell phone was used inappropriately in videotaping and then posting something that took place in school, in the bathroom or something like that. So it's not a simple violation, if you would, but one that's definitely at a level that rises to this area. Part of this also, we have to report it, and I want to report out to you many of the different areas of interventions and prevention that we have. Some of these are just basically, and it sounds simple, but getting involved. Students getting involved in any of our activities, athletics, anything that we have to offer here are a great way for students to build up positive behaviors instead. We have multiple ways of messaging, but also praising some of the great work that our students are doing, including the Student All-Stars. And again, within the class meetings, we talk about some of these items as well. Some of the recommendations and resources stemming off of our review of this, not only annually or semi-annually, but basically throughout the year when we see trends. For example, this year we reinstituted in-school suspension and support for the first time in quite a long time. We had a large gap between a student having a consequence that might be a 3-hour detention on a Wednesday, and then there was that big gap to out-of-school suspension. And we feel that many of those out-of-school suspensions were based on repeat offenses that maybe not one of them was so egregious that it was an out-of-school, but a repeat pattern that we wanted to address. And that's where we look to see that in-school suspension, keeping students here, but giving them time to reflect on, in a restorative way, what maybe got them to that point and what steps they can take along with any supports to prevent that from continuing. So I'm looking forward to that having a positive impact this year, and hopefully 6 months from now, we can see some improvements from that. That concludes that report. I don't know if there's any questions or...
I have a quick question. Off limits, is that just being in places they're not supposed to be, that kind of off limits?
That's a great question. That is a good question. That would typically be for an out-of-school suspension if something either possibly somebody who shouldn't be on campus. Maybe if they have an out-of-school suspension and they come on campus. That might be one case right there.
I want to really highlight and commend, the use or more reliance on in-school suspension, because I think, it makes sense that in a lot of cases, taking kids out of school for that length of time starts to really alienate them from their routine, from a sense of belonging. So I really appreciate that. And I also wonder, in terms of vaping, if I'm not saying anything to support it, but I also understand that nicotine is a substance that helps with depression, concentration, low mood. So are we doing anything to work with those students to, be less punitive and maybe more therapeutic in why they're vaping in the first place?
That's a good question. So last year, we made an adjustment in our substance abuse regulation to increase more of the supports with our student assistance counselors, Care Plus counselors and such, in order to hit that head on. Because we saw some of the repeat offenses that, yes. So, for example, the vapes that are being sold right down the street, that's highly concentrated nicotine on top of it, if it is nicotine. All right, and to the point where it's even more highly addictive than maybe what you and I grew up with. So it's not your dad's Marlboro that they're vaping right now. It is very, very strong chemicals. And the students themselves, and possibly staff too, adults will say that, yes, it is highly addictive. We've had instances where students got caught with only a few minutes left in the day because they felt like they couldn't get through the day because of that addiction. And I'm like, well, you're going to be walking home in 15 minutes. No. And they felt like they couldn't get through the day. So yes, that is definitely not just a Hunterdon Central issue. That is right there a chemical that is, we're seeing the effects of that. And I think the students also, and you know, they talk with us, are saying too that they realize that is something we don't want to get into because they see how addictive it is, even if it is legal for 21 and older. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Yep, thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Mr. Brandt.
Before we bring up Jessica for her presentation, I do just want to reiterate one or 2 points, or point out rather. We have an organizational item tonight, which we can talk more when that comes up, but it's for a discipline committee. The purpose of that committee is to hear specific cases where we might be looking for more drastic responses, more serious responses than a 10-day suspension. And the fact that we have that committee on the agenda tonight does tell us that we are seeing, and as Mr. Brandt pointed out, some increases in some troubling behavior. And aside from something like the discipline committee, which is there to hear about higher levels of punishment that might need board approval, doubling up on our supports, on our community partnerships, and on our parent partnerships as well, and all of that is important. Mr. Brandt is our chief administrative contact for our Home and School Association, which works with our parents. And I would say that that's a place where parents can work with us on a focus on climate and culture questions, among other things. And I would argue also that that's probably the best place to do that rather than Facebook or some other places that we see some of these conversations about behavior amongst our kids. But for the board, Mr. Brandt shared with me earlier today or yesterday, I can't remember quite when, it might have been yesterday, an article from Ed Week just about the discipline sort of landscape throughout the country, and just a fascinating article, and I'll share that with you all soon. So Jessica Cangelosi-Haight is here to report on our NJSLA scores. Now, I'm not going to steal her message, but she's going to tell you that, well, I guess I am, that we continue to have skepticism in some of the state assessments, but that especially as sole metrics of performance, so we'll talk through some of that. And there's no different feeling about the SLA tests. So that's not a great introduction for you, Jessica, but go ahead and we have her printout here. This is the NJSLA Spring 2023 summary of results. So go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here this evening. As Dr. Moore said, I'm here to present our New Jersey Student Learning Assessment results from spring of 2023. And if you're thinking another test results presentation from Jessica, you are correct. And I say that not to make everyone laugh, although thank you, but really it is serious. Our kids take a lot of tests, and so you're feeling that just from me presenting at the board meeting, and that's something that our kids feel, and they're sitting through it. So I think that's an important point to point out, and it leads to another important point of us talking about how this board took a strong stance with the New Jersey school boards on a resolution to assessment, and I appreciate that. And as I go through this presentation, I think you'll kind of begin to understand why it is so important. So I wanted to provide an overview of the NJSLA, and again, that's New Jersey Student Learning Assessment. This is designed to measure our students' proficiency on the New Jersey Student Learning Standards, our state standards. The students take it now in grade 9 primarily, English Language Arts in grade 9, and then math, whatever grade 9 course they're in, so Algebra 1, Algebra 2, or Geometry, and then any other student taking Algebra 1 for the first time. That is important because the state has reduced testing in this capacity that we used to have 9th and 10th grade take it. Back when it was known as PARC, we also had 11th graders taking it, so it has changed over time, and I do want to point that out. Our 9th graders, who are our current 10th graders, took this, and you will recall their disruption to their learning due to COVID was primarily middle school. So starting in 6th grade is when they had that disruption, going into 7th and then almost 8th grade. So a lot of the middle school years. Going back to the NJSLA, it's scored on 5 performance levels. That's different than the NJ GPA that I had presented to you about 2 months ago, with a 4 and a 5 meeting proficiency. So that's, and that was how PARC was scored as well, if you're familiar with that scoring process. And I just wanted to point out the change in graduation assessment requirements and graduation pathways. So as you know, we reviewed 2 months ago that the NJ GPA is now the primary pathway to graduation for students. That is our 11th grade test that our students take in ELA and math. And all students must sit for it and hopefully pass. Previously, there were secondary and third pathways, and there still are. However, the state has removed the NJSLA as a graduation pathway. It used to be a secondary pathway. And why that's important is because this assessment is no longer a high-stakes assessment for our students. This is just the test they take. It's a high-stakes assessment for us as a district, in a sense, because this is what the state uses for its federal accountability purposes. So you'll see on our school performance report, there is a section on federal accountability. They're not using our NJ GPA, which is a high-stakes assessment for the students. They're using the NJSLA. And there's a lot of debate as to why. It's primarily due to the fact that their state plan that they developed in 2015 and 2016 included these assessments, and the NJ GPA wasn't around at that time. But I did want to point that out because I think that's an important note to make. And again, I wanted to thank you for making that resolution to say that we really should only be testing where testing is going to show us the most impact and give us the most information. So I think that's important as we go through. So I will take you through our results. We have Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and our English Language Arts 9. We do have geometry results. I cannot publicly present them because you have to have over 20 students in order to present, and we didn't have 20 results to present. So we will not be publicly presenting those this evening. I'll take you through the results. I'll take you through the required subgroup performance that we usually do. I'll talk to you about the interventions and looking forward kind of what our next steps are. And then I'll be able to take your questions as well. So we're going to start with English Language Arts, grade 9. Again, this was 539 students, so a good amount of students. And you will see we had, again, we're looking at levels 4 and 5. So when you total that together, that's about 69% proficiency, which is a good proficiency amount. It's higher than the state, as you can see. It is the same, maybe 1% less than last year, and I do want to point that out. And then when you compare pre-COVID, it's hard to compare pre-COVID because these are different kids. In an ideal world, and this is where it would be, if we were a K-12 district, we would be able to make maybe more appropriate comparisons. We would be able to look at the same set of students from grade 7 to grade 8 to grade 9. Right now, we're not able to do that, and we're only testing in grade 9, so we won't see results again from these students until they hit grade 11. We have not yet had that since COVID to be able to compare kind of more apples to apples comparison. Pre-COVID, though, you will note that we were at about, most recently in 2018, 2019, 82%, but in 16, 17, we were at 73%. So I think we saw this a couple years ago as well, that we had made gains in our English Language Arts, and then COVID kind of set us back a little. I can't say if this is from COVID or not. I don't know. I don't have enough data, and I'll talk about that a little bit when we get to our interventions. But just so you have some sort of apples to oranges comparison for us. I'm going to talk about Algebra 1 now. So again, this is Algebra 1 for our 9th graders and any other student taking Algebra 1 for the first time. And I say that because this is really important. If you're looking, we are in the light blue, and again, we're looking for level 4 and 5. That's what proficiency is. So you see that's a total of 24.5%. You also see that's below the state average, and I do want to make a comment on that. We see this typically every year. Algebra 1 is also administered in middle schools. So the K-12 districts that administer Algebra 1 bring in their advanced 7th and 8th graders taking the assessment combined with their 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. Right now, you will see that we have just 9th graders and other students taking Algebra 1 for the first time. So the results are skewed a little. I did request from the Department of Education just grades 9 to 12 for Algebra 1. I thought that would be a better comparison for us, something to look at. They actually do not provide that data, so I do not have that data for us, unfortunately. It's possible it will come out once performance reports are released in about January, but obviously that's a few months away. So we're at about 24.5% proficiency, which is down 7% from last year. When you look at pre-COVID, it's similar to what I just talked to you about in terms of the English Language Arts 9. It's the same thing that we had seen recovery, we had seen increase just leading up to COVID, but we're back down to where we were a couple years prior to COVID. Again, probably inappropriate to make those comparisons because they're not the same groups of students, and probably unfair to the students because they did have interruptions to their learning, and the testing landscape is so different, but just so you have some context to the scores and to the proficiency levels, I wanted to provide that for you. We will now go to Algebra 2. This is a smaller group of students. So Algebra 1 had 350 students. That was actually down from the 415 the year before. Algebra 2 is for our gifted and talented, one of our gifted and talented pathways in math. So this had 160 students, which was up about 20 from the prior year. And so again, we're looking for proficiency, so we're looking for levels 4 and 5. You'll see that that's sitting right around 65, 66%. That's a good proficiency. You'll see one of the disappointments is that our level 5 is lower than the state average. However, you see in level 4, we're much higher than the state average. Overall, we are higher than the state average, but we are down about 7% from last year. And again, I can't tell you why. That's just how the results turned out. So we will talk about, after I present science to you as well, we'll talk about what do we do with this now that we have these results? What does this mean? So we're going to go into science. Science is a different assessment. You might recall this is for our grade 11 students. These are the students who took our NJ-GPA as well. So they took the NJ-GPA in English Language Arts and Mathematics in March of their junior year, and then they took the NJ-SLA Science in May of their junior year. So a lot of testing for our juniors this past year. The science test is designed, it says it's science content in grades 9 to 11. Prior to this test being administered, which had just started up just before COVID, we had an end-of-course exam in biology. That was better matched to a high school science curriculum and course sequence because it allowed students, depending on what grade they were in, that's when they would take their biology. Now, students just, whatever they're in their junior year in grade 11 is when they take the science assessment. And why I bring that up is our science sequence is different than some high schools. We start with environmental and earth science, students then take biology, and then they take chemistry and physics, or physics, I should say. A lot of schools will do biology, chemistry, physics. The state does not dictate. The state does want all students to hit the 3 areas of science, and that is in the next generation science standards. So they want students to have life science, which is our biology. They want students to have physical science, which is chemistry and physics. And they want students to have earth science, which is our environmental and earth science. So we make sure we hit each of these areas, but we do them sometimes in a different order. The other problematic piece about this assessment is that we don't know what the makeup is. So we don't know, is it 25% biology, 25% chemistry? We haven't seen anything come out on this yet. There's very little guidance on it. And that's the frustrating part for us. So it's difficult to say we could even properly prepare the students. We know our science curriculum is good, but does it measure up exactly what the test is measuring? We don't know. We haven't seen those test questions yet, those released test questions. So this is scored in a different way. There's 4 performance levels, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we're looking for a 3 or a 4 on the assessment. I did want to point out, I can't recall if I said it before, this is not a graduation requirement like the NJ-GPA was. So students took the math and the ELA in March, and then they took this in May, and this is not a graduation requirement for them. The reason they're tested, if you're wondering that, is again for federal accountability. We do have to test students once in science while they're in high school. So here you'll see the results. We're looking at levels 3 and 4 for proficiency. And we're 40%, which is, again, we're in the light blue. This is an increase from last year of about 6 to 7%, depending on how you round. We are above the state average. You'll see that the results statewide are pretty low, and this is something we are talking about at the state. I know we spoke to our county education specialist. He said the state is talking about it, they're working on it, and they're not sure, kind of what to do. This is just as 40% is a slight drop from pre-COVID, about 5%. Again, it's hard to make the comparison because this test is no longer relevant to our 11th graders, as it was when they had the end of course biology assessment back in 2019 and before then. That test actually measured and counted toward their requirements. So I want to go next into our required subgroup performance. So I put each of the tests, we have to break it out into certain subgroups. And so I wanted to put them all on a slide just so you could kind of see any trends that would appear. And you will see the first one is male and female. And you'll recall Mr. McIsaac talking about the difference that we saw in GPA between male and female. And you may recall that actually we had started to see some recovery of that in our 11th graders. You see in the 9th graders, there is quite a disparity between male and female. And not surprising to us, this is something we had seen. But it is a gap that we work to close then as they arrive here and as they continue through our years of English. Math, you recall, there was a gap that we were starting to close as well. I am cautious to say that there actually is a gap. Looking in Algebra 2, you'll say, oh, well, there's a 7% gap there, because the number of students that are factored into there is so much lower than we're seeing in ELA 9. So in Algebra 2, there were about 70 females and 88 males. And so that right there, it's difficult because each student, each female, is more than a percentage point.
Jessica,
Next.
can I ask you a really quick question just about the other demographics, because I'm just confused about, is this the number of proficient?
Yes,
The
I'm
percent?
so
Okay.
sorry, Rebecca. Yes, it is the number of proficient. Yes. Thank you for asking that. I'm sorry I didn't clarify that. And that will be the case on all these. So this is the number of students in the subgroups that are proficient. So here is, we're looking at race and ethnicity. And I want to take a minute just to acclimate us to this, because if you look at it, you'll see maybe I'm missing some colors. But I'm not actually missing, they're missing from the chart, but that is because there's 20 or less students and I can't publicly report on them. So whereas you're looking at ELA 9 and you can see all the race and ethnicity groups represented in there, and the disparities that we have traditionally seen in our other assessment results, when you go over to Algebra 1, you'll see that we do not have over 20 Black and African American students to be able to publicly report that, or more than 22 or more races to be able to publicly report that. Nonetheless, you will see among these 4 different assessments, there are disparities, and that speaks to the importance of the care policy that you all put together and approved. In science, you can definitely see a disparity with our Black students. That's quite a large disparity if you look at it. It was not as large in ELA 9, but certainly in science, that's a larger disparity. And then our final subgroup comparison is what we refer to as student program. So this is students with IEPs, students with 504 plans, our current multilingual learners, and economically disadvantaged. And so the same thing here, if you're not seeing a color, that's because there's not 20 or more represented that we can publicly report on. So if you look at ELA 9, we are not missing our multilingual learners. There's just that there weren't 20 that we could report on. Nonetheless, you will see, and this is something we see with each assessment, students with IEPs performing lower than their peers, their peer group in that course. Same thing with Algebra 1. You'll see economically disadvantaged in there, as well as students with IEPs. And even though it looks like there's that orange tan color is missing, that's our multilingual learners. And that is why I had the 0% still appear in Algebra 1 in science, because that is what the proficiency rate is for Algebra 1 in science for multilingual learners, which is obviously concerning to us. Another important thing to point out in Algebra 2, you will see it only has all students. We don't have students represented that have IEPs, or that over 20 in that group that have IEPs, over 20 with 504 plans, over 20 multilingual learners or over 20 economically disadvantaged. And I think that says something as well. So I wanted to kind of point those out on our charts. So I want to talk about interventions. This is the important piece. So we have these numbers. So now what do we do? The state says what we should do is not just use NJSLA, but also use it with other data. And I would agree, and those of you who work with data know that that's true too. So we're looking at NJGPA eventually once they get there, but we're also looking at it school-wide for programmatic evaluations. We're certainly looking at PSAT. That's something we began using. It provides really rich data for us, and it's kind of tried and true data as opposed to newer assessments. We're not sure how well they work. We use Linkit, as you know. That's a direct or supposed to be a direct correlation to NJSLA. And then our course benchmarks and common assessments. And we have really leaned into these. These are really important because if we just wait until we didn't get NJSLA results until the summer after the students completed the course. So if we wait until then to make any moves, we've already lost the year. So we're finding that it's really important to continually assess and diagnose. And that is what our teachers are doing. We have a really rich and robust PLC schedule where our teachers meet every Tuesday. A huge part of that is data review teams, where they are looking at this data. They're looking at NJSLA data, but really they're looking at the data from their classes, from their common assessments and their benchmarks. What I will tell you is that data is different than the NJSLA. And that's why I say I don't know, I can't say this is COVID learning loss. I don't know if students didn't take the test seriously. We don't know what it is yet because we haven't seen it suss out. But we have other data points that do not put all the students that seem to be at risk in an at-risk category. So when we're looking for these interventions through our multi-tiered system of support, we're looking at multiple sources of data. We're looking at this, we're looking at Linkit, we're looking at their course grade, we're looking at some common benchmarks. And all of that put together helps us to identify the at-risk students and then really to make the next best decision for them, whether it's just the teacher working with them in class and we recommend them coming to Block 5 tutorial, whether it's a push-in, pull-out method with our RTI teachers. There are many different things we can do, but we don't just rely on one assessment. So in math, we have IXL. You all probably are familiar with that by now, but that's really useful because we can target by skill, which has been very helpful to our teachers and to our students. And in ELA, they had been working with Common Lit in grade 11, and the bonus to this sort of platform is that it does not wait a long time before testing the student. So every so often, every few weeks, you're able to give a quick, shorter assessment in order to be able to target specific skills. And that's really what's making the most difference, I believe. We are, despite all this, we're continuing to work in departments. We are not ignoring these results. So we're continuing to look at our common assessments, continuing to look specifically at what skills we see students struggling with. So for example, and I wrote some of them down, in English, analyzing how characters develop through a plot line. That's one of our strengths. And then, so saying, how did we do that so well? Is it because we talk about these books in a certain way? What sort of learning activities are connected to that we did so well? Versus determining a central idea or theme or conclusion of a text. How do we begin to work that in better so that we can make sure the students become more proficient in that skill? And the same thing happens with math. That's the kind of work that's going on within our departments and with our supervisors. And they have many years of learning. They continue to do professional development on these topics to make sure that our students really are well prepared to go, not just for a test, right? We're not trying to prepare kids for a test, but they're well prepared for whatever their next course is, if they're seniors, whatever their next stage in life is, college or career. And then something that's really important that I don't want to forget, especially in this instance where we're talking about ninth grade assessments, is our articulation work with our K-8 sending districts. This is really important, and actually just today, the curriculum and instruction supervisor team was just discussing this, and I think I said this to you earlier today, it's really hard to do comparison on this assessment because they're different groups of students. And depending, especially after COVID, they've had kind of different interruptions in their learning. What would be great is if we could have a vertical analysis. Now, we don't have that information, but we were talking about figuring out how we can work with those sending districts so that we can have that information and so that we can have it before they get to us in ninth grade, so that we can see, like, September 1st, what are the skills that, Jessica is missing? Let's figure that out. And that will really bump up our intervention and our acceleration for the students as well. So looking ahead, that is one of our major goals. I know, and I thank you all because you approved a school goal that did center around articulation. And so that is something that the supervisor team and I are going to be working on, is getting that data. And then not just getting the data, but saying, sending districts, this is what we're noticing. What can we do? Let's look at the curriculum and let's make sure kids really are prepared when they get here for ninth grade, so that we're not spending time catching students up as much as we have been. And I think that will go a long way, but that does take some time, and I do want to point that out. We also are continuing with our common assessments and rubrics in our department. I can't stress the importance of this enough, because this has allowed us to look at data in a different way and in a more frequent way beyond just looking at the standardized test data. So this is something that we have to continue to work at. Right now, we have common assessments about quarterly, and I'd like to do it even more often. Some classes do have it more often, but I think it would be good if every class we could get that to a better point where we're doing it more often. The other thing that is important that we will continue to do is our diverse curriculum resources. So what I mean when I say that is, when we all went to school, I think it was, here's your textbook, let's open to page 72, we're gonna, learn about fractions, and then we're gonna complete these problems. And that is not how school works anymore. So we have textbooks as resources, but they're not the primary learning vehicle for students anymore. In math, we use problematic, we use GeoGebra. In science, they're looking at real live data, local data. In English, you've heard Mr. McIsaac talk to you all about the varied texts that they use. This is really important for our students, not only to be engaged, but to expose them to a variety of resources as opposed to just one resource. If you did not know, the State Board of Education just adopted new standards for English and math. So this will have an impact now on the assessment. Just as we're getting the assessment rolling again, they're going to change the standards, and those will be implemented next year more than likely. But they will not change the assessment for another 2 years. So we'll have this weird time period where now we're field testing assessments. So that just plays into even more of the importance of using more than this assessment as a data point. I talked to you all about our school goals and the role of vertical articulation. And again, I really thank you in making that a school goal, because this is going to be really critical for our ninth graders coming up. And then last but not least, I couldn't miss the opportunity to talk a little bit about personalization versus standardization. This is a standardized assessment. It's important to have some standardization, right? The state has standards. We all have to meet those standards, and our curriculum does. But there's an importance of customizing it and using really our teachers and our supervisors who are content and instructional experts, trusting them to really understand this is the ultimate goal, but how do we get there? How do we make it engaging? How do we make it thoughtful for each student to be able to meet those standards, rather than teaching them how to take a test? And so one of the things I realized is from a high view, from a different vantage point, from your vantage point, you're not able to be in our school every day and see the teaching and learning that takes place that I get to see, that I have the privilege to see. And really, all you get to see are these test results presentations. So our Student Life and Program Committee was talking about, when we do our department presentations, which will start up next month, incorporating more personalization, more examples, more celebration of students. So you see examples of student learning beyond just seeing test results. So we are going to begin to do that, and I think that's really important. I wanted to kick it off tonight by honoring a student. So I'm going to wrap an honor into this presentation, and then I'll take all your questions about the test presentation. So tonight, I am very pleased to introduce and honor Elena Lowe. She's going to come down here. Elena is a senior here at Hunterdon Central. I have something long to read about Elena, but it's because she had so many accomplishments. So Elena is recognized as a semifinalist for the National Merit Scholarship Program. So I think we should clap again for her for that. So this is based on Elena's PSAT and MSQT score, which was in the top 1% of students who took the test. So congratulations, Elena. Now, this also varies state by state, and I point that out because New Jersey actually has the second highest score in order to qualify, which means not only did Elena qualify nationally among her peers, but she's in the top of that because we had such a high cutoff to make. So I did want to recognize that, Elena. Good job to you. And she will now continue on in her application to be a finalist, which includes an essay and some submission of different activities. So we do traditionally honor our finalists and semifinalists at board meetings, but I thought it would be apropos to kind of honor Elena here as we're talking about test scores, but more than test scores and bringing it all together. So you may remember that we've honored Elena many times at board meetings before. Elena is a 2023 AP Capstone Diploma recipient and a 2023 AP Scholar with Distinction recipient. But beyond this, you'll recall that Elena has been a competition winner in the Chemistry Olympiad for 2 years in a row now. She was accepted to Governor's School of the Sciences this past year. She's president of our Women in STEM and Key Clubs, and she's the committee lead for the New Jersey Red Cross. That's not all. Elena is also a student in our Biomedical Sciences Academy, so she'll be one of the first students graduating. This is our first graduating cohort coming up, which we're so excited about. And she served as an intern for Hunterdon Healthcare, working on community health needs assessment, which was a connection she made through our Biomedical Sciences Academy. Most recently, Elena learned that her research entitled A Comparison of PTSD Rates and Determining Factors in New Jersey Female and Male Emergency Medical Technicians will be published by the International Journal of High School Research. So Elena combined her love for biomedical sciences and her experiences as an EMT cadet to the skills that she learned in her AP research class. Whew.
She's look at that.
So I didn't say that just to embarrass Elena, but that is true teaching and learning here at Central. And I know you all don't get to see that, and so we are going to make a more concerted effort to make sure you see beyond the test scores, and you don't have to hear me just say what we're doing. You'll be able to see what we're doing. So we look forward to showing that to you, bringing in more teachers, more students, so that you can truly see the teaching and learning that goes on here at Hunterdon Central. So. Yes.
So just a couple of quick sort of summary points I want to make sure we all hear. First, can we get the screen up? And I'll just mute this for now, just so that we can see everybody. Thanks. So first thing I want to make sure, and apologies if I'm reiterating this from what you shared too, but thank you for all that, Jessica. The NJSLA is no longer a graduation requirement as of when?
As of, they removed it as a pathway. When they brought in NJGPA, they removed SLA as the primary pathway. It first sat as a secondary pathway for a year, but now it's been removed as a secondary pathway. So that happened last fall that they removed it, which was before we administered the test, of course.
So this administration of the NJSLA that you just reported on was the first year that it was no longer a graduation pathway or a graduation requirement. So
yes.
The only value it plays, it doesn't have any impact on student outcomes.
Right.
We count on it though for data, but we're faced with this serious situation where students may not be engaged in it. Just so you know, in the past we've asked the state for data on how long each student has spent taking the tests. You know, that's data we'd like to see from these online systems, and I see some of our students smiling here. I don't know how long they actually spent on the tests, but that would be valuable information for us to diagnose the validity and reliability of these tests. The other thing I want to share is as we look at PSAT as a key factor in all this, we talked about PSAT with our Start Strong assessments at the beginning of the year. The Algebra 1 students in ninth grade are students that we focus in on specifically, because those are students, as Jessica noted, that haven't been accelerated in math. So they're students that we're working to catch up. In October, when they took the PSAT, nearly 70% of them met the proficiency mark on the math PSAT that we gave to them in September. So we're trying to make sense of all of this. And it takes multiple data points to do that. So I appreciate the work that you're doing here and all that you're sharing. Just know that in Student Life and Program, we've got a lot more to talk about in terms of how we're drawing a picture of student proficiency in this post-COVID era where the tests are happening, but they don't necessarily count, but some do, and then new ones come in and old ones fade out. It's a little bit of a messy scenario.
Yeah.
Just wanted to share those couple of quick points, and then any questions for Jessica. Floor is open for you all now.
I do have a quick question.
Sure.
Would it be possible for the board to get I guess last year it was like an average of the subgroups, like it was a 3.4 or 3.7?
We did do that last year, yeah.
Yeah.
We rarely do that, but I see I know the charts that you're asking about.
Yeah, obviously it's not impactful for, how are teachers teaching, things like that, but it might be useful for just broader, what are we seeing coming up? What are we seeing, that we might, as a board, be able to focus some policy on gearing towards addressing. And then, is she still here, Elena? I am not a scientist, but I read your paper, and it was brilliant, and I'm just, the fact that you're doing this at your age, I'm just completely blown away, so well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, other questions, other thoughts for Jessica? Go ahead.
Just a quick question. I don't know if this is something we already do or anything that's been thought about. For the students who are coming up, and I guess particularly the ones who are going to be taking Algebra 1 as ninth graders, you talked about sometimes needing to spend a lot of time catching them up. Do we do anything over the summer? Is there any thought about doing that to kind of make sure that they come in here ready to hit the ground running?
We have in the past run bridge programs. They are not well enrolled, to be honest with you. We can try it again. The summer is challenging. So and even quite honestly, we run tutorials, we have beyond Block 5, we have after school and evening tutorials. We try them in person, we try them virtually, we try them on Saturdays. Those are not well attended usually either. So the ideal solution to me is to get them some support during the school day, and we have a very, I think, healthy RTI system in place, but we also need the data earlier. So certainly we can try that. We'll try everything to try and help the students get caught up, but it's just, unfortunately, the kind of extra hours things usually aren't well attended.
Well, and some of the students that we're targeting have particular challenges after hours or over the summer as well, where they may be engaged in all kinds of other things, both necessary and recreational, and it is difficult. But to the articulation point, in fact, I think I was sort of saying the other day, and we have some articulation meetings coming up in the next couple of weeks, right? That we administer the PSAT in October of ninth grade. There is an eighth grade version of that test that were it to be given in eighth grade, we would have a really big leg up on understanding what the situation is for students coming up. And that would be a really important bridge for all the conversations we're having with our K-8s, because we aren't a K-12. That though would get us to a point where we're faking it being a K-12 much better. And it's a regional high school conundrum, but it's one that I think articulation can help us solve. So other questions for Jessica? Anything else?
I just wanted to make a comment. I wanted to just reiterate our gratitude for your comprehensive and cogent report, and mostly for bringing Elena in also. The board appreciates any opportunity to celebrate our students, and I think as Dr. Moore indicated, just to bring to real life the hard work that's being done and the results of that. So congratulations, Elena, and thank you, Jessica, for bringing students in to show us.
Thank you for supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you. So I have just a couple of quick items, and then I'm done. We don't have a closed session tonight, and the agenda is fairly light, so I just want to ask for your patience a little bit longer. There are two things that I just need to address that have come up in previous meetings that I want to make sure I address for you. that I address them openly, that I address them behind my name, and that you hear some of the thoughts on these. Each year, the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education, recognizes exemplary schools as blue ribbon schools. And Hunterdon Central has been recognized for that twice, once in 1996 and once in 2002. I've heard this conversation in our community about us being a former blue ribbon school. And I just need to let you know that anybody who's saying that doesn't know what blue ribbon is about. There's no such thing as a former blue ribbon school. You get the blue ribbon, you're a blue ribbon school forever. There have been about 300 schools in New Jersey that have gotten blue ribbon status. Only 25 of them have been recognized more than once over the entire history of this program into the 80s. And Hunterdon Central is one of those schools that's been recognized more than once. We are only one of 3 public high schools in the state that have been recognized more than once. So there's no such thing as a former blue ribbon school. And it's infuriating to have to talk about this because you've heard me say probably multiple times, the rankings, the awards, these things, they're the byproduct of better work that we do. Elena's pure proof of that, right? They're the byproduct of better work that we do. But while we're talking about rankings, U.S. News & World Report in its most recent issue ranked us as the top high school in the county. We are also, in New Jersey, among 30 to 40 some large high schools. That's high schools with more than 2,000 students. We're number 2. Okay? I'm sorry we're not number 1. We'd like to be number 1, right? But we're number 2. You can see back there that AP Honor Roll thing, 2015. I think that was the last time we were on the AP Honor Roll. We've just been invited back onto the AP Honor Roll. Now, the AP Honor Roll is a distinction that we get because our students are not only doing better on AP exams than they have in the past, but more and more students have access to those exams. So we can talk about numbers and statistics and all of these things, but a former blue ribbon school is not a thing. Multiple blue ribbon school is barely a thing, and we're among that elite group. And we do pretty damn well on our rankings, if that's important to you. So I want to share that and thank. And I want to celebrate Jessica and her work in just opening up the kinds of opportunities that give students the ability to do so many unique, authentic, community-based different things, to be published internationally, to contribute to community service and solutions in our community. Dual enrollment has tripled here over the past few years, and Jessica's been a big part of that as well. So I just want to celebrate her and thank her for that work, as well as for all of the work that she does to help us make sense of the measurements that are secondary to the more important work that we do. I have to talk quickly about something else, and I wasn't sure I wanted to do this, but I need to because it continues to come up, and it doesn't come up just here, it comes up across the state. And I'm going to refer to Policy 5756, which is the policy that we have in our district for complying with state rules, law, and regulation about the protection of transgender students. Policy 5756 includes it is a student-centered approach that's aligned to the law. It's a student-centered approach. That means that in the guidelines and in our policy, the school, and here's the language that people are having difficulty with, and I certainly understand this, the school does not have an affirmative responsibility to notify parents when a student expresses to us that they want to be known as a different name or under a different gender. It is simply not true that we are hiding things from parents. And I've heard that too many times here. I've heard it across the state, and I've heard it in national conversations. It is simply not true that we are hiding things from parents. Let me tell you what happens when a student comes to us and they want to be known as a different name or they want to be known as a different gender. They come to us and they ask us to make that change. And the very first thing we ask them is, do your parents know? And the parents may or may not know. Often, usually, the answer is yes. Because our parents like we, recognize that every supportive adult in a child's life is instrumental to saving their life, preserving and protecting their life. The very next thing, if a student says, no, my parents don't know, the very next thing we say is, you know we can't hide this from your parents. Because the moment we do this, any piece of mail that goes home, anytime they log into Aspen, which, by the way, we're getting rid of Aspen. I just want to let you know that. Yes, I feel like yes. Anytime a teacher calls home, that name, that gender, to the parents or guardians of, there's no hiding it. There's no secret sort of, oh, we call that child this here, but not that there. So it's simply not true that we're hiding information from parents. And by the way, no student has ever said to us, as far as I'm aware, no student has ever said to us, don't call my parents. Our workflow for changing a name even has a space on it that says parents contacted on date and time. If the student were to say, don't call my parents, what we would tell them is, we can't hide this from your parents. And the next thing we would say is, how can we help you with the situation that you're having? Would you like your parents to come in and sit with us with you? Is there a reason why you aren't comfortable talking to your parents about this? But we cannot, and we never would, change somebody's name or their gender and hold it secret. A, it's illegal, and B, it's unethical. And how dare anybody suggest that we would rob a child of a supportive adult who can make all the difference in their livelihood? If a parent is going to be there and supportive, why would we hide that from somebody? So, thank you. I'll finish with this one thought, and it's just an observation. There are two conversations happening here. There is a conversation about parental rights, which I think is an incredible conversation to have, and I'm happy to have that conversation. How do we talk to parents, and how do we work with kids about these decisions? How do we do that, in a way that not only complies with our requirements under the law against discrimination, but also complies with our student-centered need to have a student-centered approach, also signals the most partnership that we can possibly signal with our parents. How do we have that conversation? I'm happy to have that conversation. We're all happy to have that conversation. Again, why would we rob a kid of a supportive adult? The other conversation that's happening, though, is transgender students don't have a right to exist. And don't think for a second that we don't see that on Facebook, that we don't see that at the State Board of Education meeting, that we don't see that right here at our microphone, that somebody will stand up and talk about parental rights and then turn around on Facebook and say something disgusting. Don't think we don't see that. I'll have the parental rights conversation, but I'm not sitting across from the table that says, from somebody who says that these students don't have a right to exist, not because I have a political belief that I'm trying to force on anybody, but because it's empirically false. Those children are here. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Dr. Moore, for your report and for your continued strong leadership of this district. Okay, we're going to move to the first residence forum, which is public comment on items that are on the agenda for vote tonight. So only action items on the agenda. We'll have a second residence forum later for general comments. Is there anybody here to speak on agenda items for vote tonight? No? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to move into our organizational items. We have two ad hoc committees. I think Dr. Moore referred to them in his superintendent's report. One, I'm sorry?
I referred to just the one, the discipline.
Oh, correct. Right. So the discipline committee that Dr. Moore referred to in his superintendent's report, and then the HCAA, which is the Hunterdon Central Administrators Association's contract is up, and so we need to pull together a committee to work on those contract negotiations. So can I have a motion to approve those two ad hoc committees?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Butterfield?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Duggan?
Yes.
Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Reimer? And Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
All yes, motion carries.
Thank you very much. And we also need a motion on the school self-assessment that Mr. Brandt presented for anti-bullying Bill of Rights.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Butterfield?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Duggan?
Yes.
Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Reimer? And Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
All yes, motion carries.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move right into committee reports. Mr. Davidson, could you please present on student life and program?
Yes, the Student Life and Program Committee only has 4 items tonight. I think it's a record in terms of the minimum I've ever seen in a meeting. The first one is a tuition and transportation, and this is to approve tuition and transportation for 2 students, okay? The second item is an early graduation request from 2 students, again, one for January and one for June. The third item is a first reading of 5 policies, 2415, 2419, 3217, 4217, and 5305, and we're moving to approve them for a first reading. And finally, second reading for 2 policies, 5308, student health records, and 5310. I move we approve all 4 items.
Yeah, we're going to table 5308.
That was a discussion? Yeah.
Make a motion. Somebody needs to make a motion to table.
Would somebody like to make a motion to table 50?
Let him move everything
All right.
first.
I did.
All right, do I have a second?
I moved these items.
Is there any discussion on
If
that?
there's a second?
Mr. Fowler?
Thank you.
And
I'd request if we could to please table 5308 for the time being. I'd like to take that back into committee and discuss an element of it, please.
okay,
Do you have any objections to that?
no objections to that?
All right, so moving as amended.
All right,
So we've got a motion as amended, removing 5308 from second read.
correct.
I have a second on that?
Second.
Thank you. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Davidson?
Yes?
Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
Mrs. Butterfield?
Yes.
Mrs. Duggan?
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Reimer? And Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
All yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Mr. Fowler, O&T, please.
Sure, thank you. Go through this as quickly as I can, but still succinctly and completely. So first, we have 16 items in O&T this month. Our financial reports for August, both the treasurer's report and the secretary's report. Invoices for September, transfers also for September. We have 1 policy, it's reimbursement of federal and other grant expenditures, and we have 2 policies in second reading, also both in how we deal with funds from the government. Essentially, these are bolstering our policies around how we manage grants and funds from the government based off of an informal internal audit of our processes and procedures and policies. We are moving the comprehensive maintenance plan for 2024, as well as the annual maintenance budget for 2024. We have Somerset County Vocational School, sorry, one second.
Contracts.
Yeah, we have 9 different students that are going to be working with us in that regard, so we're moving that activity. We are doing a joint transportation agreement with Del Val, taking a child to Copper Hill. That printed really weird, sorry. We have a quote for band trucks to move the band as well as equipment and the company to do that. We're also moving the approval of our bus evacuations that happened in September. We have 2 vans in surplus property that we're going to be taking off of our books. We have a shift wellness grant that we're moving to accept. We have a activity on Johnson Controls for fire protection and proprietary services. This is not going out to bid because it's proprietary. So per our policy, we don't have to go to bid on that, but we are still moving it. We are receiving a donation of broadcast technologies to the department in roughly the amount of $1,613 from Coco Shaw. And we also have a donation from the National School of Nurses for students' glasses and free eye exams under the age of 18. So moving items 1 through 16.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I would just like to add that the bus driver's contract is coming up for the Joint Transportation Commission, and pursuant to the Joint Transportation bylaws, that negotiation team is made up of our current voting, at least one of our current voting JTC members, so it's not showing up on the agenda as an ad hoc committee because we don't need to create it. It exists by way of the JTC bylaws, so that contract negotiation will be starting as well soon. Anyone have any questions or comments on ONT? Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Duggan?
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
Mrs. Bledfield?
Yes.
Mr. Reimer?
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
All yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Mrs. Bledfield, personnel, please.
Yes. Personnel only has 18 items tonight, so it's a bit light. We have 3 retirements, including a couple of very long-term employees. We have Sylvia Dio, and then Jeff Burns with over 33 years with the district, and Linda Kovacs with over 25 years. So I'd like to wish them all well and thank them for all their contributions to the district. We have item number 2, a couple of resignations. Then we have some contractual appointments, including the Technology Systems Administrator. Items 4 and 5, we have the approval of the contract for and appointment of Ms. Cangelosi Haid as Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Human Resources. And along with that, in item number 6, we are abolishing her Director of Curriculum and Instruction position, and that's as of November 1st. Then we have some of our per diems, chaperones for the homecoming dance, as well as substitute teachers. We have some hourly appointments, including special ed coordinators, which are grant funded. We are appointing a substitute bus driver. We have the approval of 2 unpaid co-curricular advisors. Item 11, we have our salary guide advancements, and that's due to continuing education of our staff. We have professional development, including the attendees at New Jersey School Board's workshop. In 13 and 14, we have professional development workshop, both the instructors who get paid at the Tier 3 contracted rate and the attendees who will get paid at the Tier 1 rate. We have a couple of Schedule D coaches in item 15, a few leaves of absences in 16. 17 is just some amendments, cleaning up a couple of prior minor errors. And then finally, in 18, we have the Human Resource Specialist job description revision. So with that, I would like to move personnel items 1 through 18.
Thank you, Mrs. Bledfield. Do I have a second? Thank you, Ms. Kellogg. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I do just want to, again, thank Jessica for all of her good work and looking forward to, with your approval, expanding that even further. This, our administrative restructuring, which we set about to actually several years ago, continues with this, and just pleased that we're able to do that within a financially responsible way that continues to offer flat and even lower tax rates for most of our residents over the past couple of years. I'll also share, we continue also to work at the county level on some additional human resources initiatives, including an initiative to diversify the workforce here in Hunterdon County in schools so that it matches more closely to the demographics of our student population. You've heard me say we want to do that at scale, and so we've been working with the Educational Services Commission to ensure that they have, working with all of the school districts, an apparatus to recruit with an eye toward diversity. Not just an eye toward diversity, goals around diversifying our staff here in Hunterdon County. So I'll have more for you on that probably next month. That posting is likely already out. If it's not, it's going out very soon.
Thank you. I just have two comments I want to make on personnel. I want to congratulate also all the retirees, as Mrs. Bloodfield said. But I just want to point out Mr. Burns, Jeff Burns, has been here 33 and a half years and has been instrumental in 2 rounds that I participated of HCEA contract negotiations. So it was a pleasure working with him on that. And Jessica, what a blessing it is to have you here in district. And I'm very excited that you're on the agenda tonight for vote. So grateful for all the hard work that you do. Anyone else? Comments or questions on personnel? Okay, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Bloodfield?
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
Mr. Reimer? Yes. Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes?
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Duggan?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
All yes, motion carries.
And now I can say congratulations, Jessica. Do we have a report, Mrs. O'Donnell, on the Red Committee?
I wasn't able to attend, so your second report is coming.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Mrs. Bloodfield?
Thank you, Lori.
Yeah, so I guess I was the one member of the Red Committee who was represented at the CARE Policy Team meeting last week. A couple things that were talked about. One is the use of grant money to provide a stipend for 2 coordinators for the climate and culture work that's being done. Mr. Brandt also talked about wanting to take a closer look at some data, try and figure out if there's some root causes and belonging concerns, and see if there's differences between what's available to our students in terms of things like activities, tutorials, stuff like that, and what's actually accessible. So are there reasons that there's a difference there? Things like maybe students not being able to use the late bus, they have jobs after school, whatever, and seeing how we can sort of close that gap. And then finally, Dr. Warren talked about the need to revise our student dress code policy and regulations. The fact that there's some very outdated language in our policy. There's some potentially lack of consistency between the student dress code policy and the new policies that we just approved for staff, and making sure that it's also reflective of our CARE policy. So the committee approved her to move forward with that, so there will be some more work on that in the future. Anything else I'm missing?
We talked a little bit, a potential project on, we didn't talk much about this, but a potential project on material selection policy, making sure that in our English and other departments that we're continuing to offer robust, representative reading selections to kids. Yeah, it was a good meeting to see now the machinery in motion of projects and data and root causes, and then student leadership coming into this as well, because the coordinators will be working with students primarily on those climate and culture projects. So thank you.
So there's no action items for that committee, but are there any comments or
I'm sorry,
questions?
I have a quick question. It just dawned on me, should Ms. O'Donnell and Ms. Duggan and I have abstained from the vote for the NJSBA workshop? Is that because it's sending us?
Under personnel?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Because they're going to school boards.
Because,
But we wouldn't have enough to pass it if everyone abstained, so you're allowed to vote.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure
Thank
that
you.
we were all
thank you for.
Thank you, Heather. All eyes on Heather.
Yes. Any comments or questions for Red Committee? Okay, Ms. Kellogg, do we have an update on Communications Committee?
We're working.
No, we haven't met yet this month, so we'll have
Yeah.
updates next month.
Yeah, we're working on a policy. We'll probably have multiple meetings in the next few weeks to begin to iron out communications policy revision.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Anybody else have a committee or liaison report? Yeah.
So just wanted to share with everybody, especially our board members, fellow board members, Joint Transportation Committee, we met last week. We've been working a roller coaster ride of a year with Joint Transportation Committee in trying to redress and rewrite some of the bylaws which were created in the mid-90s and are rather outdated. We finally, after about 10 months of going back and forth between the members from this board and the members from Flem-Rare, settled on bylaw adjustments that we all felt comfortable with. We met with the JTC advisor who reviewed them, confirmed that he was able to rewrite them in a format that made more sense, but also raised a bit of a concern that the approach that we took in creating the JTC in the mid-90s is now a bit antiquated, and has suggested to the JTC that we look at how we operate and see if we should shuffle the cards a little bit and restructure it into a different format. So we've met a good number of times, and we continue to meet internally on O&T.
Before
as
this
part of
meeting,
that.
after this meeting?
Before this meeting, after this meeting, to discuss this and talk about it. One of the critical things that we are concerned about and cognizant of is, as President Hughes mentioned, we're going into driver negotiations. It needs to start according to our bylaws before December 1st of this year, and will probably run until about June of next year. We also need to hire and appoint a new transportation director, as Glenn Barry has announced his retirement last month. So all of those things are things that are going to change, or could potentially change, how our transportation department and transportation for 6,000 plus kids works in our district. And so that's why we're spending so much time, so much focus on it. I also think that it's worthy to note that there were concerns in this roller coaster ride over the last couple of months, and they've even bubbled up to the County Superintendent, Department of Education. And so we're also addressing those. Dr. Moore and Ms. Spitzer are in communications with their offices to try to make sure that we're transparent with all those concerns and that we address them in a timely manner so it doesn't interrupt all of the important business that's happening over the next couple of months.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. Any comments or questions about that? Does anybody have additional board business? No? Okay, with that, we're going to move into the second public comment. We've got a full house tonight, which we're always happy to have folks come speak. Can I just get a sense by show of hands how many people intend to speak tonight? Okay, so we're not overly. So I think we'll be okay sticking with our 5 minutes and 30 minutes total. Everybody agree with that? Okay. So just a reminder, you have 5 minutes to speak. Dr. Moore will set a timer for 4 minutes. That will be your warning that 1 minute remains, and then I'll set a timer for 1 minute. Please come to the mic, state your name, town of residency, and there should be a piece of paper up there to sign in.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Quinn Mazzio. I live in Flemington. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a senior here at Hunterdon Central. I wrote this speech earlier in the morning in my public speaking class because last night I was busy doing college applications, as most seniors do. I am what a general educational survey would call an average high school student. I have mediocre grades, I participate in extracurriculars, and I'm a friend to many. But to some people in this room, I am a threat. According to them, I'm a threat because I am transgender. By identifying as a trans student and simply asking others to use my correct name and pronouns, they believe I am pushing my religion and beliefs onto the community. Thankfully, my parents support me for who I am, and I changed my legal name a year ago to Quinn, but I know for others it will not be that way. I am lucky to be treated like this, and I cannot overstate that enough. Standing here talking about this is likely going to make me an easy target for transphobic remarks and harassment at the school because despite what is claimed time and again, Hunterdon Central does not respect or care about its trans students. Now let me be clear, the staff cares about us and the general well-being of all students, but the student body as a whole barely tolerates their trans classmates. What I'm about to say might be difficult to understand for some, but if I wasn't allowed to change my name to Quinn and my gender to male in the school system before freshman year, I likely would not be here today. Gender-affirming care and the help that I received from the school to change those things are two reasons I'm still alive today. The fact that we have a student body so prejudiced to these ideas is simply awful. The harassment I witness and occasionally receive is based on an unchangeable characteristic, plain and simple. These adults who come out of their way from other school districts are doing nothing more than bullying. These people bully and belittle children in attempts to protect their beliefs. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I grew up Christian for 13 years, but Jesus did say that one of the two greatest commandments was, "Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself," from Matthew 22:39. My existence is not a political issue. My life is not something that can be thrown around and used as bait to justify bigoted behavior. The people I love and the people who love me are not threats, and it is unfair and immoral to claim anything otherwise. I'm not asking for any special treatment. I'm asking for basic human decency and respect. I ask the board to recognize this and to not give in to people who would rather see children die than respect their identity. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Quinn.
Hi, my name is Silas Sova, and I'm a junior at Hunterdon Central, as well as a junior officer to our Central's Gender and Sexuality Alliance. Hearing about everything that has been going on at other schools involving our transgender policies and being questioned and overturned is quite honestly very disheartening. These policies are not only helpful, but necessary for the safety and comfort of trans kids at our school, including myself and Quinn. Without these protections, we are putting our trans youth in danger. A survey that New Jersey's attorney cited from trans youth shows that over 40% of trans youth who come out to their families have neutral or unsupportive reactions, with 10% more of families having violent reactions, and 15% of trans youth getting kicked out or running away. While I am lucky enough to have a supportive family along with some other people, not everyone has that safety net to fall back into. Getting rid of these policies would not only cause extra stress for trans youth, it would also cause them to lose their safety and possibly even their family. School is supposed to be a place for learning, and the focus of school should be giving these kids an education. All kids have the right to be themselves and not have to worry about persecution because of their identity. To those on the board who stand with our school's LGBTQ youth, and to those here tonight in support, we thank you and hope you continue to support our trans youth and other LGBTQ students at this school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Blake Neva, and I'm a junior at this high school. I participate in a large amount of extracurriculars here. These activities, while creating fun ways to explore my interests, also offer a safe place for people of all ages, sexualities, races, beliefs, and genders. I don't think I will ever be able to understand the difficulties that people a part of the LGBTQIA+ community deal with on a regular basis. Lots of people nowadays treat them as if they are wrong, and I cannot imagine what that must be like for them. These people don't decide they are gay, trans, or bi. It is a part of who they are. Seeing people try to take away somebody's actual identity from them in school, a place where we are supposed to feel safe, accepted, and feel happy is simply put devastating. I can also say for certain that it is not easy for a lot of people who identify as trans to be at school. Making these accusations towards them, saying that we praise them, it's not helping, it's hurting. And that's what this is really all about. We should not be here to hurt people who are just trying to be themselves. As some of you may or may not know, coming out day was 5 days ago. Coming out can be very scary at times for somebody who is a part of the LGBTQIA+ community. When people who have not yet come out see people that our schools should not welcome them as who they are, that's not helping, that's hurting. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Blake.
Hi, my name is Amelia Bernhard Yates. I'm a senior here at Hunterdon Central and president of the Gender and Sexuality Alliance. I just have a few short things to say tonight, going to keep it brief, to reiterate some of the feelings that my peers have expressed. I just want to commend the board for your continued support of the LGBTQ+ community and all students here, and hope you continue to provide resources that allow us to exist and feel safe in the school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jim Vargas. I live in Monmouth Beach, long-term resident of Raritan. I had not planned to talk about the transgender issue tonight, but my niece is transgender, and we were out on Saturday. She turned 21. I took her for some cocktails, or him, and I get kind of confused. When she was younger, she banded her breasts, and she's had them removed. She always had serious psychological problems. And she came out to us and told us. So she wanted to be called, her name was Isabella. She wanted to be called Dylan. We call her Dylan. We treat her as a friend. We understand that she's going through it. But I got to tell you that the things that she went through and all the changes and all acceptance did not fix her psychological problems. And sometimes it's hard to understand, even in a loving way, because when we were chatting, she was telling me about her boyfriend. And I don't know necessarily how to pull that all together. Putting straight, people should be able to express themselves and live their lives the way they can. People have a right to differ with that. What we have a problem with is twofold. One, it's being politically used to divide us. It's politically used to attack us. And people being really confused. Now, sure, there are bad things that people say about transgenders, but I don't see it around the people I do. They may be confused, but they don't. Now, along those lines, about a year ago, I stood here, Mrs. Hughes, and I said, here's the new policy. Here's the thing that's going into it. It says you don't have to tell the parents, but please involve them. Why did you wait a year to tell us you do that? Why would you do that when people are now being divisive? It's a good rule, okay? But it's just kind of, and it gets even confusing this. I spent 40 years in corporate. I love Jessica's presentations, right? But on her presentations, she talks about the difference between males and females. But this board supports a new sex education standard that says that gender is fluid. How the heck are we supposed to hide our hair of that? This environment is creating a confusion that creates anger. And the anger comes into it. There are a lot of people out there that don't understand. They probably don't think it's the right way to live, but they're not mean. They're not trying to hurt people. And you need to embrace that. Having said that, I did lay out 10 points last time we got together, which I've sent notes to you. I haven't had a response. But that's not what I'm here to talk about tonight. I think we got some real problems. And Ms. Hughes, I'm going to ask you to do something. You're not running for office this time. I want you to do something real American. I want you next week to organize a talk. Invite all 6 candidates running for the board to come up here and sit in front of us. Give them 10 minutes apiece to tell us what they're about, and then give 30 minutes of questions and answers. I've looked around. I haven't seen nothing that can do it. And I'm going to tell you, Ms. Hughes, you have excellent moderator skills. You can manage anything. I would suggest you do it. I know it's short term. I know it's risky. I looked around and didn't say it's wrong about it. But
Mr. Vargas, there is next Monday exactly that happening here.
Great. Well, I love you.
There's a sign right out the door, outside the front door.
I don't get everything that comes into it.
I don't know that all are participating, but
They were all invited. All candidates were invited.
And where's
next
it going to be?
Monday. Excuse me?
Where's that going to be?
Next Monday in the IMC, 7 o'clock?
I believe so. There's a sign. There are
Sorry,
several
6:30.
signs right
There are
out
signs
front.
around campus.
On our Route 31, there are signs right along our property line there. It's easy to sort of miss our signs because there are a lot of election signs out. You can't obviously put an election sign on our property, but there are signs for the Board of Ed Candidate Forum that'll be happening on Monday night. The Teachers Association is sponsoring that.
Great. Well, I'm going to end this because I'm going to say congratulations. Well done. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Vargas.
Sandra Gong, Raritan Township, parent, taxpayer. Dr. Moore, thank you very much for explaining policy 5756. That was excellent. Thank you very much. Usually when we speak at the podium, we don't state our agenda. This evening, I will state my agenda. My agenda includes mental health statistics, an ode to Sticks and Stones, what you might not know, and an ode to the kids at Central, especially the ones that are here tonight. Mental health statistics. There's an epidemic of mental health disorders in young people today. In 2020, suicide was the second leading cause of death in those aged 10 to 14, and the third leading cause of death in those aged 15 to 24. This data is from the CDC and the Surgeon General's office. I remember picking up my daughter from school one day, and she comes running up to me saying, "Mom, I did it. I finally did it." I'm thinking she got an A on an exam. But what does she say? She says, "Mom, I finally made an appointment with a mental health counselor." I appreciate that schools provide assistance with mental health issues. My husband and I will always be grateful for the counselor who treated our daughter. By the way, my daughter said it was okay to share this story tonight. I think we all remember the nursery rhyme about sticks and stones. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Today, we know that isn't true. Words can be incredibly hurtful. We know that the effects of bullying can lead to depression, anxiety, loneliness, and low self-esteem, which could lead to self-harming behavior. If we can save the life of one child, isn't it worth having mental health support programs in place? Dr. Moore, you mentioned Facebook. So here's something about me, and it's hard to actually talk about me because I'm actually a very private person. My husband is Jewish. We have been members of a local synagogue for over 18 years. We mourn the loss of all innocent civilian lives in Israel and Gaza. I am heartbroken and sad. I'm beyond sad for the victims and the families of the victims. I am offended and incredulous that some members of this community have accused me of being connected to Hamas. That's on my Facebook page. I've attended these board meetings for the last 2.5 years. I've heard many hurtful comments about LGBTQ kids. So here's what I hope for the kids who feel targeted and marginalized. I hope that you will be safe. I hope that you will find your friend group and that you will protect each other. I hope that you will find support from your family or from your school. You will graduate from Central and you will be greeted by a world that can be challenging and complex, but also diverse. You will meet people who may not be like you or who will be just like you. They might be of a different religion, sexual orientation, economic background, or have different political views. But don't be angry at those who might not like you because of how you love or how you pray. Think about it this way. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they're apprehensive because they've never met anyone who is gay, lesbian, or transgender. Maybe they will have the courage and kindness to sit with you and talk to you. That is my hope for you. By the way, black and yellow. I'm wearing black and yellow. I'm a big football fan. I'm not a Steelers fan. I want to get home to watch the Phillies because my husband's a Phillies fan. I'm a Giant fan, and they're really bad this year. I just felt like dressing in black and yellow to look like a school bus. There is no hidden meaning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gong.
Hello, I'm Renee Rao, and I am from Reddington. The job of the school board is to be policymakers and administrators, as well as to advocate for all the students. Your religion and your politics, whatever they are, that's fine, that's your business. But they do not belong here at this school or interfering with the business of the school board. People say it's unholy, it's sinister, it's unnatural, maybe it's of the devil, maybe even it's mental illness. We know it can lead to higher death rates for these children and the adults. And of course, I'm sure you all know, I'm talking about being left-handed. The likelihood of being left-handed went from as low as 2% in the 1800s to over 11% today. Suddenly, after the 1950s, there were a lot of left-handed people. Was it a fad? Was it a sign of a new world order? Was it a sign of the end of times? No. People were just free to not hide that they were left-handed. Today, most of the world understands there's minor differences in the brains of people who are left-handed. It doesn't make them wrong or bad, just different. So I want to thank the board for accepting all the students for who they are, whether they're left-handed or right-handed, and for keeping your politics and your religion out of the school and off of the school board. And to the LGBTQ community, we see you, we hear you, and we are here for you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. We have about 10 minutes left in public comment. I see two folks in the back. I certainly want Mr. Rupp, a staff member, to be recognized. So do we have three more speakers?
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, two in the back.
Good evening. Jay Hoff, Flemington Borough. I'm also the co-founder of Flemington QTs, Flemington Queer Trans. I wanted to start off by just, first of all, commending the students here tonight who spoke. They were well-informed, empathetic, and eloquent. You obviously have some very intelligent young human beings here, and I think that this school should be proud of that. I also wanted to talk about 3 simple words: transparency, integrity, and accountability. I would like to ask where the transparency, integrity, and accountability is for 3 sitting board members who ran on said platform. In my private correspondence with Ms. Peterson, she refused to sit down with me because I will continue to assume the worst of her and her intentions. However, what else am I supposed to assume based on her actions? Let's review what she's done so far as a sitting member of this board. All of this is per correspondence and documentation from recent OPA requests. Ms. Peterson filed a suit against the board after she was linked to the violently transphobic and racist Twitter account, Mama Llama. Per this documentation, she used the username jmurph4567 to impersonate a fictional central parent named Jillian Murphy and sent an email to Superintendent Moore about her daughter coming home upset because the women's history display in the IMC included 2 men, aka trans women. She misrepresented her identity when she contacted Strauss Esme, the school board policy law firm, claiming to be a board member from another school, and inquired about how a district would go about modifying a policy. She also said that she could not sit down with me because she had found a new job. She failed to mention that she is now working for the same law firm, Murray Nolan Baruti, that filed the ethics charges, the federal complaint, and the currently pending petition on her behalf. She is working for the law office that is suing this district. Where's the transparency there? These lawsuits have cost the district thousands of dollars, and should any of the complaints filed against her be found to be substantiated, it may cost the district thousands more in funding. Why is her political agenda more important than the education of the students here at Central? Where's the transparency from Reimar and Dugan, who have refused to make any sort of statement about the pending ethics violations against their running mate? Dugan even abstained from the vote on whether the board would move forward with submitting the charge. I am just going to assume that both of you agree with all of the content of the Twitter account in question. Feel free to correct me via public statement, as was requested in my correspondence to the board on June 26th of this year. With all this drama, we don't need more of the same. Board meetings should be boring. We don't need people on the boards who want to eliminate all curriculum that mentions racism, homophobia, transphobia, such as candidates Santangelo, Gray, and Prendamano. We certainly don't need folks who believe that Antifa and Black Lives Matter staged the undemocratic assault on our nation's capital on January 6th. We don't need folks who don't believe that science supports trans folks. Ask any of the 30 leading medical professional organizations in this country, they'll agree, and masking policies during a global pandemic. We don't need more frivolous lawsuits, such as Santangelo's complaint against Ms. O'Donnell, which was thrown out with prejudice after she attempted to claim that wearing a rainbow mask is discriminatory. We don't need to waste more taxpayer dollars with ridiculous lawsuits that benefit no one. We don't need more transparency, integrity, and accountability if this is what you mean. And just another thought. Per a statewide Oprah project from the New Jersey Public Education Association, only 4% of parents have opted out of statewide health and physical education standards. You talk about catering to a small percentage of people when you want to accept queer and trans people. Why should we cater to the 4% of you who can't accept that we exist? Thank you.
So our speakers have multiplied. It looks like we have 3 speakers remaining. Is that correct? Is everybody okay with the 3 final speakers? Yes, okay. So this will be it after the young lady behind Mr. Rupp.
My name is Janet Quattrone. I live in Flemington. As has been said by others, as always, my thanks and respect to the members of the board who are committed to serving and respecting all the students at their schools. My thanks to those members of the board who remain committed to true educational principles, wider and deeper knowledge of the world around us, curiosity, critical thinking. I wanted to share the thoughts not just of myself, but of many of my neighbors and friends in this community. A parent's right, lowercase p, lowercase r, to raise their own child by their particular code or beliefs is not in question. It is my clear understanding that educators and members of this board welcome conversation and authentic participation with the parents of the students in their charge. However, parental rights, uppercase P, uppercase R, is no more than a prettified calling card for the ignorance, the insensitivity, the intolerance, and the hatred that leads to violence. Just last week, people commemorated the 25th anniversary of the brutal murder of Matthew Shepard, who was killed because he was gay. And the language used by people then is the same language used by those people now who would disrespect and demonize LGBTQ+ youth. So that is certainly one reason why educators who spend so much time with young people from day to day should be committed to the safety of all their students. I and my neighbors want to support and vote for persons who put the needs of students first and are especially committed to the safety of their students who are at risk. But candidates who align themselves with the New Jersey Project and Moms for Liberty are candidates who choose not to believe in the overwhelming independent data demonstrating the danger of ongoing climate change and the need for citizens to explore solutions to this danger. They are candidates who would promote or would be complacent or complicit in the face of book banning, which impacts all students. And they are the candidates who are willing to agree with these extremist and fear-mongering organizations when they post that, quote, educators want to trans your kids, unquote. There is not enough time in public comments now or in the next Board of Education meeting to address the inaccuracy and absurdity of that statement. So I and my neighbors support those members of the board and those candidates who would remain committed to the true and honorable task of serving, respecting, protecting, and educating all of their students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quickly.
You'd think with bad handwriting I'd be faster. Nah. Oh, I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. And I don't mean that just in like tonight, I am, but there's an exhaustion that you face when you watch your students get up and defend themselves from adults. We talk about HIB. We talk about bullying, but the definition of an imbalance of power is adults punching down at children, and not just any children, the most vulnerable of our children, and some of the bravest, I will have you all know. I have had trans students come into my room crying because of the way they were treated, one way or another. And I've held space for them. So as a staff member, I want you to understand that in case you thought they're being dramatic, they're not. I see it secondhand all the time. I don't get to see it firsthand because enough of the kids who are not good about this stuff know well better than to do it in front of me. But not every part of the school, not every hallway, not every bathroom can be safe. An imbalance of power is often found with hiding, right? Whether they hid in their bed sheets or sought solidarity with red armbands, or they cowered behind a computer screen as they targeted our kids under anonymity. And yeah, I know people think, oh, it's an allusion to the KKK, it's an allusion to the Nazi, he's being hyperbolic. No, it's the company you keep. It's the company you keep when you cowardly attack children as adults. I don't care where you're coming from or what God you think you're serving or who. When we allow that to happen to our students, it reflects badly on every single adult in the room who didn't stop it. And the ones trying, man, it makes us feel helpless. And let me just dispel a myth. This concept that gender fluidity is new. It's not new. It was crushed. It was crushed by intolerance. North America held gender fluid people among the First Nations for thousands of years before anyone remotely as pale as myself set foot on this continent. And fun fact, the first pale people that did weren't the ones most people think it did. It's called Newfoundland, and they had really cool hats. They even managed not to commit a genocide. Who knew? But the point is, Two-Spirit people were honored, and their names were respected, and sometimes they shifted with the moon phase. And that is the definition of gender fluidity. Among the Celts, among the Old Norse, among many cultures to the east that I cannot even begin to tell you I'm a scholar on, but I know enough to know this, they've been a part of us forever. They are us. They're humans. Simple as that. And what causes them to be so mentally ill disproportionately isn't that they're born that way, and it isn't that they feel this fluidity or this shift. It's the way everyone else treats them. We get the legends of Two-Spirit people because they were honored and treated with some reverence. And they were at minimum accepted and cared for like anyone else in their community. So I'd go ahead and wager they had less of those issues just from being cared about. And one last point I want to tell you about, I've stumbled across this just eating my dinner between the gym and coming all the way back here. I heard a story tonight, no joke, social media, but it's vetted, it's verified, of a trans kid who's currently in shelter because their parent was the person threatening to kill them. And I know that that is an extreme case. Not as extreme as I think, but it's an extreme, it's more on the more extreme end. But suicide and death come from cruel words, callous statements, casual violence that doesn't go that far. The stakes are very, very real.
Thank you, Mr. Rupp. Before you step away, Could you just please state your name and
Oh, I'm so
city
sorry, I
residence for the
skipped that.
record? Thank
I
you.
am Alexander Rupp, and I live in Pottersville, and I teach here at Hunterdon Central.
Thank you, Mr. Rupp.
Really didn't want to have to follow that great speech. So I'll be quick. My name is Christina Wong. I'm a resident of the Raritan Township municipality. I have a student in this school, a student that just graduated from the school, and then one will be coming to this school next year. So I just had a couple quick things that I wanted to bring up. Something I've talked about before, pet topic of mine is the Aspire program and how much I love it. So I had the pleasure of meeting with the Aspire teachers during back to school night. If you haven't gotten to talk to them, I would recommend going to talk to them. I could have talked to them all night. They're wonderful people, and it's a fabulous program that helps students that struggle in a traditional classroom setting or have other like difficulties that make it harder for them to learn day to day. So they go to this program and take the same classes as everyone else, but in a smaller setting. And it was just amazing to talk to the teachers and hear how much they ask questions about wanting to get to know the whole person of each student. You know, what do they like? What makes them tick? What are they into? Like they really understand how much caring about the whole student makes them successful in the subjects that they're trying to learn. And my takeaway from that was just kind of how much I wish that could be or should be the goal of all of the school policies. And you know, I know we say it on paper, but as you see in the HIB reports and the standardized test reports, the lived experience of the students tells a different story. And I think that's something that, as the board, that you definitely need to make a priority, because there are student groups that struggle. There's you know, obviously the LGBTQ student population is under a lot of heat all of the time, and as you can imagine, that affects their ability to learn in a relaxed and supported environment if you're always feeling like even the adults in the room are not behind your success. You know, students of color, students of second language, English second language, immigrant students, all of them are here to learn and thrive, and as the board, you're the decision makers in the room that create the policies that support their success, and I hope this coming year that you do better, and that when we see those numbers come up on the board next year, or even, you know, at the mid-year check-in, that they'll be better, that, you know, we will see change in how the student success happens because the adults in the room are the ones supporting them and setting the example for the types of human beings that we hope they become. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wong. So with that, we will conclude our second residence forum and move on to board comments. Is there any comments that anybody wants to make before we conclude?
Yeah, I will talk, if you don't mind. We're fortunate to be in the Little Theater today, so that everybody could be here to have their chance to be heard, and I appreciate that. What has been happening more and more at the meetings in the last few months is one side of idea debate comes in and finds a target and goes for it, and then the next happens the next time. You know, this is a case of the moral versus the monsters. You know, you can draw the horns on the people up at the table, but you're drawing horns on a caricature of someone has made, and that's unfortunate. And that goes for everyone who has had their time in that spotlight. I don't agree with any of that targeting. I'm here to do the business of the people of this district, which is why I was elected, not to air grievances against one another and to toss blatant smears around. I have great confidence in my legal positions, and I have brought those claims to protect myself and others from being put through this very type of campaign. I will not be trying my legal case here. That is for the judge, and the ethics complaints of anybody on this board will be handled by the SEC in time. I'm here to focus on the success of this district and every one of our students. And these issues are intended somehow to just derail that, and I think that's unfortunate. We have a lot of kids here, and I'm grateful to see every one of you kids here. And I thank you all for speaking, because you are the reason we are here, is for the education, not for the other, all of the other, everyone wants to come in and get their pound of flesh. I will note that members of the public have raised issues that were solely discussed in executive session and that I don't believe would have been operable, which appear to have been shared outside of the board for the purpose of assassinating my character once again. It is just such behavior that has resulted in the lawsuits of which you complained, so I will reserve my right without further discussion of those issues. But I'm not resigning. Ms. Hoff, I apologize. Ms. Hoff, I'm sorry. What is your preferred? Ms. Hoff, I appreciate your coming to share your thoughts as always. It is your right, but I will be here next month. Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to say something too. I don't think that on issues like these there are sides. I think there's the right to exist, the right to be seen, and the right to be safe and heard and represented. And to Quinn, I am so sorry that you're experiencing that, and I'm sorry to every student here that experiences that. If we want to talk about test scores, or we want to talk about climate and culture and belonging, well, we can look at what's going on in our school and how students are having to come to board meetings and defend themselves against hate speech, and advocate for their right to simply exist. And frankly, I think it's disgusting. I don't think any of you should have to be here. We should be doing good things for all of you and working hard for you. And you belong. We see you, and we will work hard, speaking for myself, not the board, to make sure that you can feel a sense of belonging and safety here, because you deserve that.
Is there anyone else on the board who'd like to make a comment? No? Okay. So surprisingly, we have no executive session tonight. So can I have a motion, please, to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Halloween. See you next month.